The biting Arctic wind seemed to want to tell me something that morning. As I adjusted my protective gear, I gazed out at the white horizon stretching infinitely, with no hint of what we were about to discover. I, James Montgomery, had organized this expedition with a clear purpose: to study the effects of climate change through ice core samples. At least, that was the official reason stated in our project. What we didn't mention in the reports was the thermal anomaly detected by our satellites. An inexplicable heat signature 5 kilometers beneath that frozen expanse. Our base, Horizon Station, was a cluster of metal structures designed to withstand the Arctic's extreme conditions. The narrow hallways and artificial lighting created a surreal contrast with the absolute whiteness outside. There were 12 of us in total: geologists, climatologists, drilling engineers, and communication specialists. All top experts in our fields, and all sharing that mix of fear and fascination with the unknown that defines true scientists. The data is consistent, James. There's something down there that shouldn't be, said Dr. Sophia Chen, our geophysicist, showing me the readings for the third time that week. The lines on the graph were unmistakable, a source of energy that defied all known geological explanations. The decision to drill was made after 3 days of intense debate. Mike Donovan, our chief engineer, developed a meticulous plan for the operation. We would use the thermal drilling equipment, capable of cutting through ice with millimeter precision, preserving the layers for later analysis. If there's something down there we shouldn't disturb, we'll know before we reach it, Mike assured, with a confidence I knew was partially fabricated. The truth was, we were venturing into the unknown, and we all felt it. Drilling began on a Tuesday. I remember clearly because it was the day Rachel, our communications specialist, turned 34. We celebrated with a makeshift cake before beginning the procedures. That moment of normalcy now feels like a farewell to the life we once knew. The first 3 kilometers went exactly as expected. The ice samples revealed Earth's climate history, warming periods, ice ages, all recorded in the air bubbles trapped thousands of years ago. Our team worked in 8-hour shifts, keeping the operation continuous. It was in the 4th kilometer that things began to change. Sensor readings became erratic. The ice temperature, which should have gradually increased with depth, showed fluctuations that defied basic physics. Hot and cold zones alternated without any discernible pattern. "This doesn't make sense," murmured Dr. Hamid, our climatologist, as he analyzed the data. "It's as if something is actively manipulating the thermal environment." That night, we gathered everyone in the conference room. The tension was palpable. Jack, one of the drilling technicians, suggested halting the operation. "Maybe there's a reason this has stayed buried for so long," he said, voicing what many were thinking but hesitant to say aloud. I decided to press on. "We've come too far to turn back now. If there's something down there, we need to know what it is, not just for us, but for humanity." My words sounded too grand even to my own ears, but I believed them. I still do. On the 5th day of drilling, we reached 4.8 kilometers deep. That's when the sensors picked up something solid. Not ice, not rock. It was something with a density and composition unlike any known natural material. "We're 200 meters from the target," I announced to the team. "We'll slow down and proceed with extreme caution." The following hours were the most tense of my life. Every centimeter forward was monitored by multiple sensors. Radar images showed something none of us were prepared to see. A perfectly symmetrical chamber carved into the ice, or rather, formed within it, as if the ice itself had moved aside to create the space. At exactly 5 kilometers deep, our drill hit empty space, the chamber. The cameras inserted into the borehole transmitted images that left us breathless. A space approximately 30 meters in diameter, with perfectly smooth ice walls that reflected our artificial light in hypnotic patterns. And in the center, rising like a finger pointing to the sky, stood the monolith. Black. Completely black. Not like coal or obsidian, which reflects some light. It was as if this object absorbed all illumination directed at it. It stood about 3 meters tall and 1 meter wide. Its surface was covered in symbols that looked carved, or perhaps were part of the material itself. This shouldn't be here," whispered Rachel, voicing the obvious. Nothing in our understanding of geology, paleontology, or human history could explain that presence. We decided we needed to examine the object in person. A team of 4 was selected: myself, Sophia, Mike, and Hamid. The procedure to reach the chamber took nearly 24 hours. We widened the borehole and installed a cable system to lower ourselves down. The descent was silent. Each of us lost in thoughts about what we might find. The cold intensified as we went deeper, which contradicted all known laws of physics. It should have been getting warmer with depth. When we finally set foot in the chamber, the feeling was indescribable. The silence was absolute, as if all the sound in the world had been sucked away. Our footsteps made no echo. Our voices seemed to die mere inches from our mouths. "The symbols," said Sophia, cautiously approaching the monolith. "They don't resemble any known writing system." She was right. The symbols weren't hieroglyphs, nor cuneiform, nor any other human script. They appeared fluid, almost organic, as if they were alive and moving imperceptibly. Mike tried to collect a sample from the monolith's surface. His equipment failed instantly. "I can't even scratch it," he reported, frustrated. It was Hamid who noticed it first. "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was just the blood pulsing in my ears. But then I realized there was a sound, almost subliminal, coming from the monolith. A rhythmic hum, like a deep, slow breath. "Is it alive?" asked Rachel over the comms. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but it's active in some way." At that moment, something changed in the chamber. The light from our flashlights seemed to dim, as if the darkness itself was thickening. The hum grew slightly louder. "We need to go back and think this through," I decided, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. On the way back to the surface, the silence between us was heavy with meaning. We had found something that should not exist, something that defied our understanding of the world, something that seemed to be watching us, studying us, while we thought we were the ones doing the studying. That night, while the team debated our findings and the next steps, I stepped away to look at the stars. The Arctic sky, clear and bright, somehow seemed less mysterious than that black object buried beneath our feet. For the first time, I truly understood that there are things in this world beyond our comprehension, things that perhaps should remain hidden. But it was too late to turn back. We had opened the door and something was awakening on the other side. In the weeks that followed the discovery of the monolith, Horizon Station changed. What had once been a place of methodical, organized research became a space filled with uncertainty and inexplicable phenomena. It all began subtly, with minor equipment failures that we initially blamed on the extreme cold or material fatigue. In the communications room, Rachel was the first to notice something truly strange. She was doing her routine check when she called me over urgently. "James, you need to hear this," she said, handing me the headphones. What I heard froze me in place. A rhythmic pattern of beats and hums, like a deliberately created code, but completely alien to any known human language. "When did this start?" I asked, trying to stay composed. "About 2 hours ago. At first, I thought it was interference, but it's getting stronger. And the weirdest part is, it only appears on the frequencies we use to monitor the chamber." That same night, the monitors in the control room began to glitch. The screens flickered with no apparent cause, showing for split seconds what looked like symbols similar to those on the monolith. Mike, our engineer, spent hours trying to find the source of the issue. "I've checked all the wiring and systems," he reported, deep bags under his eyes. "There's nothing wrong with the hardware. It's like something is communicating through our own equipment." It was after the third day of these occurrences that the nightmares began. I was the first. I dreamed I was in the underground chamber, alone before the monolith. But this time, it pulsed with an inner black light, if such a thing is even possible. The symbols on its surface moved like serpents, rearranging themselves into patterns that I almost understood. I woke up drenched in sweat, with the distinct feeling that there was something crucial I had failed to grasp. During breakfast, I noticed the unusual silence. Everyone looked exhausted, distant. "Rough night?" I asked, trying to sound casual. One by one, they began to describe dreams almost identical to mine. Sophia had dreamed the monolith spoke to her in a language she almost understood. Hamid described the feeling of being watched by something ancient and patient. Jack, our usually pragmatic technician, seemed the most shaken of all. In my dream, I was the monolith, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I felt the weight of ages passing, ice forming around me, and I waited. Always waiting. I decided we needed a better understanding of what was happening. I organized the team into shifts to continuously monitor both the equipment and the chamber itself. We installed additional sensors and cameras transmitting live footage. The monolith remained motionless, seemingly inert, but we all felt that something had changed, as if it had awakened. On the 5th day after the discovery, while reviewing the station's archives in search of any clue, I found something disturbing. An old folder, almost hidden among routine records, contained documents about a previous expedition, dated 1982. The reports were fragmented, as if someone had deliberately removed key parts, but what remained was enough to chill my blood. A joint Soviet-American team had discovered something similar to our monolith, although in a different location, about 200 kilometers away. The accounts described erratic team behavior and unexplained interference with equipment. The expedition ended abruptly, with mentions of multiple fatalities and unexplained disappearances. The final report, signed by a certain Dr. Andrei Volkov, concluded with a disturbing recommendation. The area must be permanently sealed. The object must not be disturbed again. There are things humanity is not ready to understand. I kept this discovery to myself at first. I needed time to process what I had found and decide how to share it with the team without causing panic. But time was not on our side. The next morning, I found Rachel in the communications room staring at the monitor. She hadn't slept. "It's getting stronger," she said without looking at me. "The signals, it's like it's trying to match its frequency to ours, learning to communicate." The data she showed me was alarming. What had begun as random interference now showed clear patterns, sequences repeating with subtle variations, like a learning process. That very afternoon, the first truly frightening incident occurred. Sarah, our doctor, was collecting blood samples from everyone, a precaution to monitor for any effects of exposure to the extreme environment. When it was Jack's turn, he simply froze. His eyes glazed over, and he began muttering in a language no one recognized. "Jack?" Sarah called, concerned. "Are you okay?" He didn't respond, continuing that unintelligible murmuring for nearly 2 minutes. Then, suddenly, he snapped back to himself, with no memory of what had happened. We reviewed the recordings afterward. The sound coming from Jack's mouth bore an unsettling resemblance to the patterns we were picking up from the monolith. It was as if, for a few minutes, he had become a conduit, a channel. In the days that followed, similar incidents began to occur with other team members. Moments of absence, strange behavior, and a growing sense that we were no longer alone in our own minds. The nightmares intensified, now shared in such specific detail that coincidence was impossible. That's when I decided to confront the team with what I had discovered in the archives. "We need to consider the possibility that the monolith is more than a mere artifact," I explained during a tense meeting. "The records indicate there's been prior contact, with devastating consequences." "You're suggesting we abandon the research?" Mike asked, visibly irritated. "After everything we went through to get here?" "I'm suggesting caution," I replied. "We need to understand more about what we're dealing with before we go any further." The discussion that followed was heated. Part of the team wanted to continue investigating, arguing that we were facing the most important discovery in human history. Others, clearly shaken by recent events, insisted we should seal the chamber and report our findings to the proper authorities. In the middle of the debate, the alarms went off. All station systems began to fail simultaneously. The lights flickered, and for a moment, we were plunged into total darkness. When the power returned, the monitoring screens showed something that made my heart race. The monolith was changing. Its surface, once uniformly black, now displayed luminescent patterns that pulsed in sync with the sounds our sensors were picking up. It's responding, Sophia whispered, her voice a mix of awe and fear. It's communicating with us. Sensor data from the chamber spiked. Temperature fluctuated wildly. Radiation surged in erratic bursts, and the audio instruments captured an increasing cacophony of sounds none of us could interpret. It's like it's trying to build a bridge, said Hamid, analyzing the data. A connection between whatever it is and our world. That night, as the station thrummed with the rising energy emanating from the depths, I gathered the team for a final decision. The monolith had clearly awakened, and its influence over us and our systems was growing exponentially. We have two options, I said, looking into each exhausted, frightened face. We can keep observing, trying to understand, or we can acknowledge that we've awakened something we're not prepared to face, and act accordingly. The decision wasn't unanimous, but the majority agreed the risks were too great. The monolith, whatever it was affecting our minds, our equipment, and potentially much more. The lessons from the previous expedition were clear in the incomplete files I had found. As we prepared our containment plan, the phenomena intensified. The equipment in the chamber recorded a dramatic increase in energy emissions. The monolith's luminous pulses became faster, more intense. Then, amidst the growing chaos, Mike detected something that turned urgency into full-blown emergency. The energy is spreading beyond the chamber. Readings show it's affecting the molecular structure of the surrounding ice. That's when we grasped the true scale of the danger. If whatever that energy was managed to extend beyond the confines of our isolated site, the consequences could be incalculable. The containment plan we had discussed as a last resort became our only option. We would have to use the explosives kept for emergencies, not to destroy the monolith, which we doubted was even possible, but to seal the chamber permanently beneath tons of ice and rock. We need to act now, I insisted, as the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. We're out of time. The looks exchanged in that moment were heavy with a shared understanding. We were sacrificing the greatest discovery in human history to protect a world that would never know how close it came to the unknown. The Horizon Station control room, normally a place of order and scientific precision, had become a scene of calculated chaos. Monitors flashed wildly with impossible readings while alarms blared in a discordant symphony. The air felt charged with electricity, and each breath grew harder, as if the very oxygen was being altered by an unknown force. "Energy levels are still rising," Sophia shouted over the blaring alarms. "The spread is accelerating. The monolith it's changing the environment around it." I looked at the faces of my team, brilliant scientists reduced to silhouettes of fear and resolve. We had crossed a line no human was meant to cross, and now we faced the consequences. The decision before us was clear, no matter how painful. "Initiate the self-destruct protocol," I ordered, my voice strangely calm amid the chaos. "We have to sacrifice the station to contain this energy. It's our only chance." Mike moved quickly to the main panel, entering his authorization code. "We need your final confirmation, James," he said, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. I hesitated for just a second, thinking about everything we were about to lose. Years of research, invaluable equipment, and possibly the greatest discovery in human history. But then I remembered the documents I had found, the fate of the previous expedition, and the growing sense that something fundamentally wrong had been awakened. "Confirmation authorized," I replied. "Begin the sequence." The system's automated voice filled the room. "Self-destruct initiated. T-minus 10 minutes to detonation. All personnel must evacuate immediately to designated extraction points." Our emergency plan had been meticulously drafted over the past few hours. Explosive charges were strategically placed around the chamber and at key structural points of the station. The idea wasn't to destroy the monolith, we doubted that was even possible, but to bury it again beneath thousands of tons of ice and rock, sealing it in a way that, we hoped, would be permanent. "T-minus 9 minutes, the system announced. "Everyone to the helicopter now," I shouted, leading the team out of the control room. Our only means of escape awaited on the external platform, already prepped for emergency takeoff. That's when the sensors recorded something new. A wave of energy erupted from the underground chamber, more powerful than anything we had detected before. The lights throughout the station flickered and died, leaving only emergency lighting. A ghostly red glow that turned the corridors into something from a nightmare. "What was that?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "It's responding to our attempt to contain it," Hamid answered, frantically checking his tablet. "The energy levels are... my God, they're beyond anything we can measure." T-minus 8 minutes. We continued our desperate run through the corridors. Each second felt stretched, dilated by adrenaline and fear. That's when we heard it. All of us, simultaneously, a voice. Not a physical voice we heard with our ears, but something that resonated directly in our minds. It was as if the monolith itself was communicating, transmitting not words, but sensations and concepts that our consciousness struggled to translate. Jack was the first to fall, clutching his head and screaming, "It's in my mind! It's showing me things, civilizations, worlds, knowledge." "Keep moving," I ordered, pulling him by the arm. "Don't let it in. Focus on the evacuation." T-minus 7 minutes. We reached the transit locker, where our protective gear for the external environment was stored. With mechanical movements born of training, we suited up in thermal gear while fighting against the insidious intrusion in our minds. The images were fragmented, yet powerful. Visions of distant worlds, of technologies beyond our understanding, of beings that transcended matter itself. It was too much knowledge, violently poured into brains unprepared to receive it. "It's a library," Sophia whispered as she adjusted her helmet. "The monolith. It's some kind of repository. Not just of information, but of consciousness." T-minus 6 minutes. We passed through the decompression chamber and finally reached the external platform. The Arctic cold hit us like a wall, minus 40 degrees Celsius, with cutting winds that made it feel even worse. The helicopter waited, its rotors already spinning, piloted by Lars, our Arctic operations specialist. "Get in," he shouted over our helmet comms. "There's a storm coming in from the east. We need to take off now." That's when I felt a presence behind me. Turning, I saw Mike standing in the station doorway, his body rigid, his eyes locked on something invisible to the rest of us. "Mike!" I yelled. "We have to go now!" He looked at me, but his eyes were different. Pupils dilated, expression distant. "We can't destroy it, James," he said, his voice strangely calm. "It's too precious, too unique, too ancient. It's been here longer than humanity itself, waiting for the right moment." T-minus 5 minutes. With a sudden movement, Mike turned and ran back into the station. "Mike!" I shouted, moving to follow. Sophia grabbed me firmly. "There's no time, James. He made his choice." The conflict inside me was gut-wrenching. Leaving a team member behind went against everything I believed in as a leader. But looking at the others, exhausted, terrified, on the verge of collapse, I knew I had to prioritize the ones I could still save. "Take off," I ordered Lars, climbing aboard the aircraft. T-minus 4 minutes. The helicopter lifted quickly, pulling away from Horizon Station. Through the windows, we watched the structure that had been our home for the past months, now seeming strangely small against the Arctic vastness. A strange light pulsed from within, leaking through the windows, a glow that was neither electric nor natural. T-minus 3 minutes. "What do you think will happen?" Rachel asked, her voice nearly lost beneath the thrum of the rotors. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Our explosives should be enough to collapse the entire structure and seal the chamber. But the monolith, I'm not sure it can be contained." "That thing," said Hamid, "wasn't from this world. It wasn't just alien in the physical sense. It was alien to reality itself." T-minus 2 minutes. The helicopter had reached what we estimated to be a safe distance. Lars stabilized the aircraft, holding it in place about 3 kilometers from the station. From there, we had a clear view of what was unfolding. The light emanating from the station intensified, becoming a pulsing beacon that tore through the Arctic darkness. The very air around it seemed to warp, as if the laws of physics were being momentarily suspended. T-minus 1 minute. "And Mike?" Jack asked, breaking the tense silence that had settled. "He chose to stay," I replied, the words catching in my throat. Something in that monolith called to him. Maybe it called to all of us, in ways we don't fully understand yet. To minus 30 seconds. The final seconds of the countdown seemed to last an eternity. In my mind, I relived every decision I'd made, every step that had brought us to this irreversible point. Had it been scientific arrogance, reckless curiosity, or simply humanity's inexorable fate? To seek out the unknown, even when the unknown brings danger? 10, 9, 8. We collectively held our breath, as if that simple act might somehow influence what was about to happen. 7, 6, 5. The station's glow reached its peak, so bright we had to turn away even from a distance. 4, 3, 2, 1. The moment of detonation was marked first by silence, a brief instant of absolute stillness, as if time itself had paused to contemplate what was happening. Then came the impact. The explosion was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. It wasn't just physical. It seemed to contain elements of something more, a release of energy that transcended categories known to science. A visible shockwave rippled outward in all directions, distorting the air like heat above asphalt. The helicopter was struck violently, throwing us against our harnesses as Lars struggled to maintain control. Below us, where Horizon Station had once stood, there was now only a vortex of ice and snow collapsing in on itself, forming a crater that closed like a wound being sealed. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The extraordinary light vanished. The air stopped warping. The burst of energy, whatever it was, dissipated into the vast Arctic expanse, leaving only the howling wind and the desolate landscape. Lars regained control of the aircraft and stabilized it. For long minutes, no one spoke. We stared, transfixed, at the place where the station had stood. Nothing remained but an irregular depression in the ice, as if something enormous had simply sunken into the frozen crust. "Did it work?" Rachel finally asked, her voice breaking the silence. I checked the data on the tablet I had brought with me, the only link we still had to the remote sensors positioned at safe distances from the station. "Energy readings are dropping," I confirmed. "Whatever that thing was, it looks like we managed to contain it." "For now," Sophia added quietly. Her observation lingered in the air between us, heavy with implications none of us were ready to fully explore. Deep down, we all knew what we had found was just a fragment of something much larger, a window briefly opened to realities that human science was not yet prepared to comprehend. The journey back to civilization was long and silent. Each of us processed what we had witnessed in our own way. For some, like Jack, the impact was primarily traumatic, nightmares we knew would linger for years. For others, like Sophia and Hamid, it was an intellectual revolution. Their previous conceptions of physics, archaeology, and the very nature of reality had been irrevocably altered. For me, it was a burden, the responsibility not only for the lives lost under my command, but also for the decision to bury something that might have fundamentally transformed human understanding. Months have passed since then. Our official reports were filed under the highest level of secrecy. We were subjected to extensive debriefings and, in some cases, psychological treatment. Officially, Horizon Station was destroyed in a fire caused by equipment failure. The families of Mike and the others we lost received vague condolences and generous compensation. Life moved on, or at least it appeared to. But for those of us who were there, who looked upon the monolith and felt its ancient call, nothing would ever be the same again. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, sweating, convinced I can hear that same rhythmic hum emanating from the depths. And I wonder whether we truly contained it, or merely delayed an inevitable reckoning. Whether what we buried beneath the Arctic ice will remain dormant forever, or if it is simply waiting, patient as only something truly ancient can be, for the next group of explorers curious enough to dig where they shouldn't. I often think of Mike, and what he saw or felt that made him stay. Was it knowledge? Promises of power or transcendence? Or something far more fundamental? A recognition, perhaps, that we are all connected to something vaster and more incomprehensible than we've ever dared to imagine. As the months turn into years, I watch the news with a different perspective. Small, seemingly disconnected events around the world that could hint that what we buried wasn't as contained as we thought. Unexplained interference in electronic equipment, anomalous weather patterns, reports of shared dreams in distant communities. Perhaps it's just the paranoid delusions of someone who's seen too much. Perhaps it's just my mind trying to process the trauma of those Arctic days. Or perhaps it's the understanding that there are limits humanity was never meant to cross. Truths we were not designed to endure. What I learned on that expedition, above all else, is that the unknown remains unknown for a reason. That scientific curiosity, noble though it may be, must sometimes give way to caution. That there are questions whose answers may cost more than we are prepared to pay. And so I carry on, bearing the weight of that knowledge, that experience, while the world around me remains in blessed ignorance. At times, it feels like a curse, to be one of the few who knows just how fragile our grasp on reality truly is. Other times, it feels like a privilege, to have glimpsed, however briefly, the true depths of the unknown. Either way, one thing is certain. When I look at the stars now, I no longer see distant celestial bodies. I see potential doorways to realities we've barely begun to comprehend. And I wonder, with a chill that never quite leaves me, which of those doors should remain forever closed, for the sake of humanity, and the preservation of everything we believe to be true.